So, Ledama Olekina, are you the senator for Narok or the senator from Narok?
I'm both.
But you saw the argument by the senator.
I did. I did. But I think the good senator has the point because we oversight all the 47 counties. So I think to some extent we'll cut him some slack and say, hey, you know, he really probably did not need to get into the argument. But the fact that we oversight all the 47 counties gives him the right to say that he's a senator from Busia. Yes.
Okay.
But he's elected by the people of Busia.
Yes. To represent them.
Yeah. But his first main role is to oversight his own county.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Janet is going to give you the day's quote, and then we'll see you and hear your reflection of that quote.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I was mentioning to Mariam and Eric that I was doing a deep dive over the weekend of some of the more sort of like fearless African freedom fighters. Steve Biko was one of them, a fearless South African anti-apartheid activist, founder of the Black Conscious Movement. And one of the quotes that he said, which was from his speech, The Definition of Black Consciousness in 1972, is he said, the challenge of the oppressed is to liberate themselves without becoming oppressors. The challenge of the oppressed is to liberate themselves without becoming oppressors. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think it's Rousseau who said that the thin line between the rich and the poor is quite small. There's a thin line between the rich and the poor. And also I think Rousseau talked about the issue of the master and the slave. So, you know, when you look at the master and the slave would want to be like the master, and then ultimately the master become a slave of the slaves because of what is expected of him. Yeah, so I do agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's an unfortunate thing because you do have people who push for the rights, and then sometimes stay perhaps past when they should have and end up being the oppressor instead.
Yes.
So yeah, to your point.
Not even staying past, is that they pretend to be liberators, but deep down they are actually oppressors.
But I actually do not think that it is the individuals themselves. It is the system that they create. You know, I'm one of those who believe that the day we fix the nation, the day we fix Kenya, is the day all of us realize that power is transient. So if the leader recognizes that power is transient, but those you lead, and particularly those who brought you to power, want you to remain there so that they can continue lining their pockets, it becomes very difficult. You know, sometimes you look at these African dictators, when they walk like zombies, you know, because they really don't want to be there. But they are forced by the gun to remain there to make it easy for those who they lead and those who they, quote unquote, you know, worship him, continue to line their own pockets.
So in very many aspects, they are actually slaves.
They are slaves, exactly,
of the system.
Of their people. And that's actually, that's why I agree with that quote. Completely, you become a slave, completely.
So there's something that's been happening, and we raised a red flag about this last week, that the first amendment to Kenya's constitution that's now currently before Parliament, and if nothing changes, it could pass, is going to introduce 3 funds. And we just call them here straight up slush funds. The Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2025 is seeking to introduce the National Government CDF, National Government Affirmative Action Fund, and the Senate Oversight Fund. It's gone through public participation. It's still with the committees now before it goes properly into the second reading and amendments. What's your position on this?
You know, I'm a firm believer of the separation of powers. We have the judiciary, which has the power of the sword, of mercy. We have the executive, which has the power of the sword, and the legislative arm of government, which has the power of the purse. It becomes virtually impossible to lead a nation if those who are tasked with the responsibility of legislating, coming up with laws, are the same one who wants to be able to implement those laws. I personally do not support that, and I will not be supporting that. I don't support CDF. I don't support Senate Oversight Fund. I also do not support these NGAF. I don't support them. That money should be going to county governments. That money should remain with the national government. Most of it should go to county governments. Because if we agree to devolve our resources and our functions, there's no way that you can devolve and then remain with the resources here. The problem is that we don't carry out a lot of civic participation or civic education to be able to educate our Kenyan citizens that our role as legislators is to make laws. We make proper laws, you know, we divorce ourselves from those laws, and then we ensure that we now oversight them, you know, the right way. But we can never do that because of our own selfish interest. All of us, when we are there, we're just there to line our own pockets, you know. If you look at chairpersons of budgets, they're there, and when you actually follow the trend of chairpersons of budget, they're billionaires themselves. Because when they're creating the budget, they put so many projects that sort of like benefit them individually. You know, they would say there's a road here, tarmac road here, it's about 2 billion. They will bring in their own contractors, you know, who they either take a big cut, maybe 30%, or they actually do the work and probably do it a shoddy job and they end up making money. So the truth of the matter is that citizens out there ought to recognize the fact that lawmakers, members of the National Assembly, members of the Senate, all those who are called MPs, their job is to go and make laws. Our job is not to come in and say, I have CDF money now, I can be able to build this church. You know, I can be able to buy a school, a bus. And give bursaries. And give bursaries. That's ridiculous. Yes. You know, we're completely missing the point here. We need to focus on our work. And that is the reason why you don't see a lot of lawmakers in Parliament. Sometimes Parliament is empty, you know, and people, you'll never hear them really delve down into issues that is affecting their people. You'll find them going out there making deals, you know, with people in the private sector in terms of developing legislation. But then when we now, some of us sit down and we develop legislation because we take our time to read and do comparative analysis with other countries, it becomes a challenge, you know? So people will come in and they'll say, no CDF, no budget. No CDF, no budget. I mean, seriously, we cannot continue pulling down progress. We just cannot do that. Progress is not about a member of the National Assembly going out there and telling people this is my road. You know, it's not. What system of governance is that? Should we call it a Kenyan system? It is not a parliamentary system. Neither is it a presidential system. We subscribe to the presidential system. We have 3 arms of government. There is a clear separation of powers. Then why don't we, you know, practice what we preach?
How many other senators do you think are of the same view as you?
I'm of the view that I would probably say maybe 60% currently. You know, we still have a few. I mean, I was actually shocked yesterday to hear one of my brothers, who I will not mention because of just respect, mentioning that we have to fight for CDF. You know, we don't have to be pulled that way. We have to be independent thinkers. We have to be able to call a spade when you have to call a spade and build this nation. Our time will come and go. We have to do this for posterity. We have to do this for future generation. We're not doing it for ourselves. And like that's why I said, the moment we realize that power is transcendent is the day we begin fixing this country.
I want to hold that thought because we'll come back to how development is done. But there's your pinned tweet on X. I will kick the IMF and the World Bank out of Kenya in the near future. We can build our own economy on our own. We don't need their loans. This was 2023. I think for a lot of Kenyans, the come to Jesus moment around the IMF and the World Bank's involvement in our economy it happened in 2024. But this was a few months before that, at least 6, 7, 8 months before that. How's it going with kicking the IMF and the World Bank out?
You know, if I had the power to do that, I would have kicked them out a long time ago. Those who are students of history, political scientists, people who have been able to study economies and done comparative politics will be able to tell you that the problems that we have in Kenya began with the structural adjustment policies, which were introduced by the Bretton Woods Institutes, that is the IMF and the World Bank. The moment they tell you to tax your citizens so that you can be able to pay their loans is the moment you start destroying and become a slave of the IMF. Today, a friend of mine yesterday called me and said, there'll be a meeting in Naivasha today for the IMF, for the World Bank. You know, will you come? I said, why should I come? I think it's about time that Kenya has come of age where we realign our own existing resources, we build our own economies, we look around, we scan our horizon, we look at the resources that we have currently. Minerals. This country, has abundance of minerals. We have Murima Hills. The Americans are interested in Murima Hills. They are beautiful, rare earth minerals, which are there, which are worth, other people say that they're worth trillions. If we focus on realigning our own existing resources, trust me, we would be able to use those resources and build our economy. Other countries are doing it. Other African countries are beginning to now say, look, we don't want your loans. Those loans come with heavy conditions. We don't want them. Can we learn to live within our means? Can we all speak the language of living within our means and realigning our own existing resources? We have an abundance of resources. All we need to do is to understand. But the problem is, I'm a lawmaker. I don't even understand my role as a lawmaker. I want to be able now to do the executive role. It's ridiculous. We have county governors. Those county governors, some of them don't even understand their own role. When the president is traversing through their counties, they're just there saying, Mr. President, I want this and this and this and this. Why can't you just do what you have to do? The national government does what they have to do. And ultimately, send more money. We have an agreement between Kenya Kwanza and ODM, to be able to devolve the amount of shareable revenue that should go into our counties should be 450 billion, at least. In the Senate, we have proposed 465 billion because we have been scientific. We've looked at, non-essential expenditures, and we've looked at non-conventional expenditures that have been increased by taxation, which is all this because of IMF. And if we don't send that money, the employer themselves will not be able to pay the contribution of NHI, is it SHA? Is it housing levy? Because remember, there's a contribution from the employee and there's a contribution from the employer. So IMF for me, World Bank for me, is what is going to continue putting us down as a nation.
But how did we get here?
We got here because of two things. One, I think past Moi era, all of us were eager to become a developed nation. President Moi, call him whatever you want to call him, but if you go back and you study history and you look at the trends of the economy, Moi, although he did not really help this country develop a lot, he used own source of revenue, mostly more than he borrowed money. When Kibaki came, he borrowed some, but the debt that he left was little. When Uhuru came, he borrowed quite a lot of money, and things started changing a lot. So you asked me how we got here. We got here by trying to be what we are not, and also time changes. Talk about Gen Zs, their rights. I hope that a lot of this youth will be able to now embrace those rights and have solutions. There's a difference between, embracing a right and not having a solution. How do you resolve it? So that's how we got here.
So basically, Parliament, the 11th and 12th Parliament specifically, was oversighting the executive as it was borrowing wantonly. Over 6 trillion shillings borrowed in that 9 years of the 11th and 12th Parliament. And now here we are not able to raise sufficient revenue to pay our debts and develop our country. So we end up now having to either borrow or seek assistance from the Bretton Woods institutions, right?
The problem, and I think it comes down to that point of not understanding your role. If the 11th and 12th Parliament lawmakers were not fixated in CDF, then just maybe would have been able to do our job better. We're all fixated with our oversight fund. We didn't get it. Uhuru did not give us the oversight fund. Finally, we got something, not really oversight fund. It wasn't really anything much. CDF is still there. It's difficult when you're not focusing on your job to be able to understand. Eric, if you're driving a taxi and you're a newsmaker, you have to choose one. There's no way you can mix the two. You have to be here and work. Put your thoughts together in what you're going to be able to engage Kenyans with. So the problem is that we are so fixated, in this culture of saying you are MP because it goes both ways. It's not only us, the members of parliament, who are in the wrong. Even the citizens out there, they're saying, MP, give me bursary. You know, MP, give me bursary. Senator, give me bursary. Governor, give me the bursary. So, of course, a member of the National Assembly will come and say, the only way I can help these people and get re-elected is if I fight for this CDF so that I can send these kids to school. That is the problem. If you look at county governments, I've been oversighting county governments now for the last 8 years, and I do a good damn job at it. I look at their accounts. I'm very good at looking at their accounts. And I see where they go wrong. Most county governments do not understand the devolved functions. You will see a lot of county governments building primary schools, building secondary schools. That is not their role. That is the role of the national government. You will see county governments building almost something similar to a level 6 hospital. That is not your role. That is the national government. You know, we have a crisis. In Narok County, we built something close to a level 6 hospital, huge. We're not able to do it. The contractor ran away. You know, we had to kick that contractor out in the second, in the current administration. Now, we had to go and seek for help from the national government. The military is there now helping us trying to complete that house. Kakamega is another thing. Governor Oparanya, who is now the cabinet secretary, also did that. He started a huge white elephant project where he built a huge hospital. He became a burden, because also the other problem is that government projects are not carried out with people who really have a desire to fix this country. It is people who want to, sort of like just lie in their own pockets. If you ask me, and I know this because I've done it, if you ask me how much it costs to build a 1 kilometer road, Maram Road, and make it a very good, sort of like almost an all-weather road, I'll tell you it's 400,000 shillings. If you ask somebody who works in the government, he will tell you 1.2 million.
That's per kilometer.
Yeah, per kilometer. Can I then follow up by asking what reforms, maybe you've spoken to it, but what reforms then would you support, if any, that could make CDF just transparent and impactful for the communities it's meant to serve?
None.
None?
None, absolutely none. I want that money to go to county governments. If any of that share could be able to help the citizens. Remember, a member of the National Assembly only has a constituency. A county governor has the entire county. What we need to do is to be candid and talk about devolution. What did we mean by devolution? We cannot water it down. What is the point of having the provincial administration in Narok County? Yet we have a governor. What is the point of having CDF, yet we have a governor? Send that money. Let both members of the National Assembly and the Senate oversight that money. If it is on a constituency level, let us oversight. One of the most important things that we must do as a nation and leaders is that we must invest heavily in citizen participation. We are carrying out with public participation at the moment. Even if you look at developed nations across the world, citizens' participation, we now have things which are called citizens' assemblies. They are not organized by anybody. It's just the citizens who work. We have one similar here, and I've seen a few politicians now engaging them in Jivanji. Bunge la Mwananchi. We need to have a lot of these citizen participations. We need to have a lot of these Bunge Wananchis. And we politicians must also go and sit down there, not to tell them what to do, but to listen. You listen, come and implement what these people want. There are brilliant Kenyans out there, brilliant Kenyans, who if they were given an opportunity to lead this country would do a much better job. But what? They are poor, they have no money, they have no CDF to bribe voters with. So Janet, if you ask me what reforms, none. That money, put it in the kitty of the county governments, period.
Do the constituents, though, demand, because you've spoken about leaders not doing what they're supposed to do, right? The constituents, though, even if you're speaking to active citizenship, citizen rights, sometimes they might argue, but this is what my constituents want me to do.
No, that is not what their constituency want them to do. Because he has not done the job of educating the constituents what his job is. What he needs to do is to say, we develop sort of like a caucus group, or maybe we develop a development board, which has got the cabinet, as the governor, the senator, and all members of parliament. So if it is Narok, we have 6 constituencies. So during the budget making process, it's the way we do it in parliament. We begin with the budget policy statement. We look at the medium-term debt strategy. Then we come into the issue of the division of revenue. Then once we devolve the revenue, then now we go back into the county, the county allocation revenue, because now we have to divide the money horizontally. We first divide by vertically and then horizontally. So when we have this money, a member of the National Assembly can then go in during that budget making process, the same time, go in and sit down with the county assembly, and sit down and educate the members of the county assembly. Tell them, this is what we have that we are sending to you. This county assembly members should also be able to come out and put in their citizen participation forums in their constituencies, in their wards, and talk about this. Let's look at the budget. If we look at the budget, I come from Narok East. As a citizen of Narok East, what do I want to see? I want to see good feeder roads. Has my MP invested in making sure that I have feeder roads? Has my member of the county assembly invested in it? So when we look at and demystify the budget, look at the budget. When you look at the budget, ask yourself, does this budget cater for the entire county? What is the priority? Every county government has got something that they call an annual development plan. They have a county integrated development plan. A county integrated development plan is a 5-year plan where the county governor comes in and say, this is my plan for the next 5 years. Then it is sort of like divided into on a yearly basis, annual development plan. On this annual development plan, it is based on the budget. Yep. And the budget is funded through the Finance Act. They also have a Finance Act of the county. So you look at it and you say, like, I'll give you a good example of Narok County. Last year, we raised about 5 billion, close to 5 billion.
On-source revenue.
On-source revenue, and majority of that money came from the Masai Mara Game Reserve. Then, of course, we now have to look at other avenues, sources of revenue. There's the issue of licenses fee, there's the issue of cess collections, there's also the issue of building permits. All these issues are there, liquor licenses. I don't want to put this as a revenue measure, but it ends up actually raising more money. Hospitals, So when you look at your income statement, you have to look at your income versus your expenses. At the very basic, even the chairman of the budget committee must have a basic accounting, experience. True. Understand how are we going we must run counties, or we must even run the Kenyan government as a business. This is your business, Janet. You need to make money. You cannot you need to look at the inflow and the outflows. You cannot just continue and saying we want this, yet you don't understand where that money is coming from.
What's preventing the leaders from a county from doing that? Let's not even go into the members of the National Assembly. Do you sit with the MCAs of Narok as their senator and the governor of Narok to talk about the budget for Narok County?
2 things. Let me even talk about 2022. The good thing is that I always keep my records. When you call the members of the county assembly to have to sit down and talk to them, it becomes a tug of war between you and the governor. Because you remember, when we are there, nobody knows what the other person wants. Some people would think, oh, this guy is trying to pull these members of the assembly so that he can run for governor and outsit me.
Or he can impeach
me. Or he can impeach me. So it becomes very, very difficult. You see? So now the governor has got to entice the members of the county assembly by, giving the, by yielding to their demands. And what are their demands? They would say, we want a ward development fund. We want a ward development fund. So it comes back from CDF to ward development fund. What is the work of a governor then?
Right. Hold that thought. We have to take a break really, really quickly, but we'll be back with Senator Ledama Olekina. If you have any questions, the hashtag wow, is Fixing the Nation NTV. We'll, of course, pose those questions to the senator. We'll be right back.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic.
Many comments and feedback coming in on our social media. We're very active. We have a community of fixers online on YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and X. For example, on Facebook, Hussein Kirio says, we don't need CDF 100%. Why make our people slaves to leaders? I hate when I see parents going around for bursaries. Just fund the education, make it free.
Very good.
All those bursaries, just corruption on the move. I think the same views are shared here by Cheriot Isaac, who says, following from London, as always, let's fix the nation. Ask the senator about all these bursaries. Could they be channeled to one source? It's the same line of questioning. What are they saying on YouTube?
Yeah, on YouTube, they've gone into something else. Robinson Kisero says, ask the senator his view on the proposed internet usage bill. Why is the government afraid of information? We aren't in the 1900s. We are informed. They'll not gag us with punitive laws to silence us. That's Robinson Kisero on YouTube.
So very many of these basically are just saying, like you said, Senator, it's about separation of powers, and which is what even the courts have said on all the judgments that have come up on the NG-CDF. The principle of separation of powers is not flouted. Now let's come then to the role of Parliament. The Senate has the same role as the National Assembly, oversight, legislation, and representation, but also has this other higher authority to champion and to protect devolution. Now, we see that a story on page 7 today that says the senators are targeting 3 Ruto-CSs. There are some cabinet secretaries whom we've been summoning to come to the Senate, and the story says that they haven't come, and so the Senate has summoned John Badi, the most notorious, and vowed to initiate a censure motion against him earlier in the month. The former Suba MP snubbed the Senate once again, saying he's busy with other engagements. You've summoned the Treasury CS John Badi, the Land CS Alice Ohome, Trade CS Lee Kinyanjui, and others who don't come. And there's a censure motion coming. Explain.
I think for me, the one that I have really almost lost respect for is the lands minister. We had a very emotive issue that has to do with land in a place called Olderkesi. And when she appeared before the committee, of course through summons, because she hadn't appeared when she was invited, she was clueless. She didn't have anything. She came in not ready. She did not present any documentation. So you ask, who has good custody of all those documents? It is the Ministry of Lands. It is your department. We ask for simple things like give us the original registered list of the members of that group branch. Because if you read the law requires that before any subdivision is done, their membership has to be confirmed, and all those processes, before we move from the Community Land Act all the way, we need to be able to ensure that these people understand. What I think is a problem is that, one, we expect so much from these cabinet secretaries, particularly when we look at John Badi. And I'm not defending John Badi, but I would want to put myself in his shoes. A lot is expected of him. Badi is a different cabinet secretary compared to all the other cabinet secretaries. Because he's got to deal with the IMF to borrow money. He's got to deal with the president on a daily basis to tell him how much money there is. And then here we are, we have to oversight him. So I think, to be fair, is that we need to be able to look at this cabinet secretary. There are 2 cabinet secretaries who I believe we need to be fair with, who is John Badi and also Kipchumba Murkomen. Kipchumba Murkomen being a cabinet secretary in charge of security, sometimes it's pulled left, right, and center. I remember when Matiang'i was there, we would call Matiang'i, we would summon him to appear. We're investigating the Solai tragedy. And Matiang'i told us, I can appear before the committee at 6 in the morning. We said, brilliant, we'll be there at 6 in the morning. Now, let's look at former Cabinet Secretary of Finance. What was his name? Professor Njuguna Ndongo. When I see that we have a meeting, I would even call him and tell him, it doesn't matter, even if it's 7 p.m., come. And then he would say, okay, can I come at exactly 2 p.m. or can I come at 6 p.m.? And we say, yes, come, because we need to be able to deal with it. But then now, the meetings that Mbadi did not appear is on, I think it was question time. And I think these cabinet secretaries, if they read the Constitution, Article 153(3) of the Constitution of Kenya mandates every cabinet secretary to appear before a committee of the Senate or the National Assembly when they are called to. Shall. If you read that section of the law, it says a cabinet secretary shall appear, before the Senate or the National Assembly to be able to respond to issues or from their docket. So they need to be able to plan their calendar well. We also need to work with them in terms of planning their calendar well, but simply sending sort of like a regret letter and saying that I'm busy, I've had engagement, that is condescending. It is actually rude. It is very rude. You need to be able to engage the oversight body because it is us who can censure you. I remember we had a cabinet secretary in charge of energy, and one day we censured him. And you know what happens? It trickles down to the citizens. That guy went to try and become a governor of a county. People reminded him that even when you were called by the Senate, you didn't go. So he wasn't elected. So everybody has to be able to remember.
It will trickle down.
It has to trickle. Yeah,
I've got to tell you, honestly, what I said earlier, and it's not the first time. Whenever I see these things, coming from the Senate or the National Assembly, I tell the ladies here, you know what, this is a Japanese Spitz dog. It's called a Spitz.
I'd say we agree that it's Chihuahua.
Yeah, I think let's call it a Chihuahua.
A Chihuahua at least Chihuahua is threatening. Spitz is a lovely dog. You see you, it barks.
No, but actually, let me be honest with you.
It just barks, but
no bite.
We actually bite. We actually bite. I've given you a practical example.
Give me one censure.
I've told you, we censured the former cabinet secretary in charge of energy. And after we censured that guy, he didn't get elected. He didn't. He went he was trying to become the governor of Kericho.
But that's a consequential
issue.
At that point when you're censuring the CS, did the CS, was the CS fired? Did the CS
there are two things. There are two things, and I'm glad you've actually raised it. There's intended and non-intended consequences. So in this case, it's non-intended consequences. And I think they all have to be aware that tomorrow they might have to face those legislators again to be able to be grilled, to be sort of like, what do you call it? Like when they are appointed, they have to be vetted. So people will remember that. So I think it behooves them to be able to ensure that they carry out their functions when they are required to do that.
Is there something else does the Senate have any other tool that they can use to make sure that these cabinet secretaries and governors really do honor the summonses by the Senate?
Let me tell you something. There has to be a good relationship, because one day that cabinet secretary might be impeached. And if they continue disrespecting the Senate or the National Assembly, no one will be there to save them. The Senate and the National Assembly can actually initiate to impeach those cabinet secretaries. Governors, on the other hand, I will tell you this as a fact. Currently, when you read the Auditor General report as an example, read the Auditor General report. If there is a governor out there who wants to have a good life after they retire, when you are called by the Senate, please stop everything and you rush to the Senate. Because the Senate is supposed to sort of like help you, navigate through the issues that have been raised by the Auditor General. Remember, even on our own budget, if you talk about the issue of shareable revenue or the budget is based on the last audited and approved financial statements. Currently, the last audited and approved financial statements were for the year 2023, 2024. That is why, but they have not been approved. We are dealing with previous years, I think 2021. That's why you see the money which is going to the county is being projected as almost 14%, which is actually against the Constitution, which says at minimum 15%. So if we don't do that job, there are serious unintended consequences, very serious ones. I've been a legislator now for 8 years. I have seen people go through hell. The former governor of Samburu County, Kasaine Lololkulam, he himself ended his term not even stepping in his office. Because you've asked me whether we've got other tools that we can use. Yes. And that is when that's what I want now to tell you, Eric, Janet, and
Mariam.
That if we invest in empowering these independent institutions. Trust me, when a governor or a cabinet secretary is called to appear before the Senate or the National Assembly, they will stop everything they are doing and they will rush there.
I'm sorry, Senator. You know, this is a tired song. And there's even somebody who has said, these people, when they come to the studios, they talk so well, but out there, nothing.
No.
You know,
that's not. I don't think.
We do this,
I don't think you're comparing apples to apples.
It's been 8 years.
When it comes to myself, compare apples to apples.
It's been 8 years of Ledama Olekina in the Senate.
Yes.
We have had the Senate now. This is the third term of this particular Senate.
Yes.
It's the third term of this particular enhanced National Assembly.
Yes.
All of you leaders say, if we do this, if we invest in public participation, if we invest in this and the other, all shall be well. We pay you to make sure that you protect the independent institutions.
I like what you say, we pay you. Let me tell you something. One of the biggest problems that we have, and I can tell you this, is that not every legislator gets to parliament with a desire to change lives. Not everyone. Okay? Most legislators buy their way into parliament because citizens will only elect somebody who will give them money. Okay? So you cannot squarely blame members of the National Assembly, members of the Senate, in what is ailing this nation. First, start by blaming yourself as a citizen who is supposed to be able to vote for the person who will come in with policies, with someone who has an ideology. I bet you, when you go down there and you talk about ideology, you know, it is like going into a school and talking about a pedagogy. Not a lot of people will understand. So really, for me, we have to realize that Rome was not built in a day. It takes time for people to be able to understand. I will do my job, and I will not hesitate to do my job. I will continue doing my job. I will do. It is like the story of a starfish. There's a little boy by the seaside, and every time when the waves come, they will push the stars. And then this kid will just throw. They keep throwing them back. This guy said, "What are you doing? Don't you realize that every starfish you're sending is being kicked out?" He said, "But at least maybe one will be able to swim away, and I'll save that one." Right. So if Ledama Olekina can be able to continue doing his work, serving his people, and making sure that I go beyond my call of duty to be able to change lives, and I change one life, so be it. I hope that one life that I save, pay it forward. And then the cycle of life continues and continues.
So on and so forth.
Yeah.
There were some amendments that you introduced to the conflict of interest bill that arguably go against what you've just said.
I'll tell you why I introduced them.
Let me get the provisions right and correct me if I'm wrong.
Please.
Deleted a provision that would require the suspension of any state official facing corruption investigations until they are cleared. So now you can stay in office while investigations go on. This is from the EACC Kenya Twitter. Removed EACC from enforcement of the proposed conflict of interest law and vested the responsibility on public entities and accounting officers to investigate themselves for violations. Shielding public officials from a requirement that they must declare their wealth. Let me get that correctly. That they must allow EACC to scrutinize their wealth declarations to detect and recover stolen public property. Deletion of all punitive sanctions proposed for violations, leaving compliance with the law to be driven by the individual public officers. For context, the conflict of interest bill at first looked like a good bill, but the deletion and inclusion of some of these clauses basically watered it down to something that allows conflict of interest.
So let me respond to your question, because it's always important to understand the background of things. A lot of those provisions which we deleted, and these amendments were not brought by Olekina alone. Most of the amendments actually which were brought there were also brought by Senior Counsel Okongo Mogeni, who used to be the chair of EACC. The issue is we over-legislate. And what you do not understand is that the more roles you give to one entity, the more budget they will call for. So the biggest fight we had with EACC then was that they saw that when I removed all these things, which are already provided for by other existing legislation. Okay? There's a legislation, I think it's a Integrity Act. It covers for those issues. You understand? Number two, there is a principle of innocent until proven guilty. So if I'm innocent and you've accused me innocently because of political wars, and you kick me out of a public office that I've been elected by citizens because you don't agree with my theories, you don't agree with the way I work, it's not, but you have the muscle to kick me out. Is that fair? So we go back and say, let's remove this provision of the law that says everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and say the moment you accuse, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent.
So that's issue number one. Can I juxtapose that specific one with something? When you are in a position of power and you're holding public office, it's very easy for you to interfere with investigations, to interfere with the work of the EACC or whichever body, and that's why I think that provision was there, that you should step aside while investigations continue.
I completely disagree with that.
Please hold that thought while we get a caller. There's a caller on the line. I don't want them to drop, and then we'll get back to your answer. Evans from the US. Good morning, Evans. Good morning, Evans.
Good morning, Mariam. My name is Evan. I'm calling to ask the Senator something, and I'd like to commend him for the job that he's doing. And my question is, the county government came in with a resource in terms of the water and sewage companies that are being managed by the county government. And some of these county governments lie in cities that growing up pretty fast, right? So, some of the infrastructure that was laid by those companies. So some of the infrastructure that was laid down by those companies are pretty old, and with current organization and management of those companies being affected by the political class, it's going to be really difficult to raise revenue or even revenue bonds in future to upgrade the infrastructure. That's number one. So I don't know if the Senate is working in trying to change the organization or the leadership structure of those companies from being affected by the political class, and trying to find a way where the leadership can be moved into sorry?
Evans,
hello?
We can hear you, but what's the specific question with regards to the water management companies?
Oh, yeah. So my question is, if the Senate is working towards getting the leadership moved from the political class into a way that can be more accountable to the people, because you see, once the political class becomes in charge of such resource, it becomes much more difficult to upgrade the infrastructure. It becomes more centered on trying to employ people, and the revenues just get lost into the operation.
All right. Okay.
We've gotten.
Thank you, Evans. You'll respond to that, but maybe just go back into
but can you rephrase that question, because I didn't...
He's talking about the water management companies.
Yes.
And says that there's a lot of political interference in the water management companies. Of course, we see this from a governor comes and he's promised water to his people. And then there's a water management company that is charging a fee. And sometimes we see governor coming to say, don't charge, don't increase the levies for water, and so on and so forth.
But just so you don't lose your train of thought. We'll remind you, it's okay.
Let's go back to what you're asking.
Yes.
And then I can be
so the provision that says you should not be in office while investigations continue.
Okay, now I remember.
I think, it's to prevent interference.
One of the points that you raised, you say that, and I completely disagree with you, respectfully. You say that when I'm in a position of power, I can be able to sort of interfere with the investigation. That's absolutely ludicrous. There are institutions which are independent that carries out investigation. If those institutions allow me to interfere with them, they are the weak ones. That's where the problem is. It's not me.
Senator, you've just given us the example of former Governor Leonard Kulal of Samburu, whom the court directed not to access his office. And you said that you spoke positively about that.
I did.
And
but what I'm saying, I'm responding to the question that she raised.
There was a case in court which had not yet found him guilty.
Yes.
But he had been told, do not access the office so that you do not interfere with evidence, and also so that you do not interfere with witnesses.
I will be very candid when it comes to the issue of the Samburu County. As a member of the Public Investment Accounts Committee then, I personally visited Samburu. And I could see there was a huge disconnect between the governor and the controller of budget. When I got out of the helicopter in Wilson Airport, the first person I called was the controller of budget. Because when I was seated in a boardroom discussing the issue of a fiduciary responsibility, the money that was being, how the money was being spent in Samburu County, I was shocked to hear the county governor telling me that the COB had withheld 4 billion shillings, knowing very well that is an entire shareable revenue. You know, so the only reason you have to, like I keep on saying to you, Eric, compare apples to apples. The issue of Samburu was serious, such that it was not only the governor who was asked to step aside, it was, I believe, the governor and the accounting team.
Yeah.
So
okay, and you see, when it comes to the governor and the accounting team, there is a deputy governor. You know, so in that case, what was being investigated was in that office. Right. I have no problem of me being told, because the Senate office is being investigated, don't interfere with these documents. Okay. You can do other things that you can do.
Let's leave Samburu out of it. Are you saying that there's no political interference with investigations from independent bodies?
I think it is just about, it is a culture of corruption, really, to be honest with you.
So then that clause would have protected us from that culture of corruption if I have to leave office while being investigated.
I think what we need to do is very simple. If you look at, I always say that governors don't sign any check, but they have the fiduciary responsibility because they're the CEO of the county. You know, the Constitution does not even say the president is the CEO of Kenya, but the Constitution says that the governor is the CEO of that county. So the buck stops at him. If you look at if you read the Public Management, Finance Management Act, Section 103 and 104. Section 103 establishes the Treasury. 104 puts in the CCM in charge of finance as the head of Treasury. He is the one who, and the CEO, who literally sign all the payments that comes out. So even when that governor wants money, even the money that we're investigating these governors with, he gets it from the CEO, or he gets a kickback from the company is given contracts. But it's the CEO and the CC Finance who will line that governor's pocket. Because one of the reasons why we impeached the former governor of Kiambu is because he signed certain documents which he was not supposed to sign.
All right. I don't want to get sidetracked.
I want to go back to the issue of conflict of interest.
Yes, the conflict of interest bill. All those clauses, you've said they are provided for elsewhere in law, and you didn't want a duplication of duty.
We have a problem in this country of over-legislating. Let me tell you something. The day that even as legislators, and I want you to follow my submissions in the Senate, because every piece of legislation that comes in is to establish an authority. Yeah. That's a budget. Yeah. That's an expenditure. We forget that we have devolved functions. Why do we have to establish whatever, what do you call it? You know, an authority.
But this was
I had a big problem.
The EACC.
You know,
not
the problem with EACC was
EACC.
that, no. It was going, one of the biggest problems that I had is that these cabinet secretaries appear before me, correct? When they appear before me, if I'm very good friends with Lee Kinyanjui, as an example, okay, I have to write to EACC and tell them that I cannot sit in this meeting because I am friends of Lee Kinyanjui and we're very good friends. No, I tell the Senate, I declare the interest. In my standing orders, it is there. I declare the interest to the Senate and to the chairperson of the committee, and I say, I'd like to declare an interest. The witness here today is actually a personal friend or maybe a business partner, so I will not be participating in this.
Can you continue?
Why do we go all the way to EACC to report something that I can report to the Senate? All we said was that we wanted to make it neat. But the truth of the matter is, and let's call a spade, because the moment we call a spade is the moment we'll get progress. That conflict of interest bill was not the business of this country. It was being pushed and orchestrated by the West. It's a fact.
We have to take a break, and we'll try and see if we can, again, continue just on what you've ended on. But we are in studio with Ledama Olekina, Senator, and we'll get into other discussions after the break as well regarding, development and leadership. But you can call in, as we've just heard somebody do. You can talk to us on social media. Fixing the Nation, one conversation at a time, continues shortly after this break.
Spritzer also reacted to this, and this is what she said.
We sent a letter back in April asking the Department of State and the Department of Homeland Security for more information when they were revoking student visas and then terminating the SEVIS records. We haven't had a response from state or DHS.
So for context, the ACE, that's what do you call it? The American, oh God, I got it. Council on Education is the influential association representing all types of higher education institutions in the U.S. It plays a key role in facilitating dialogue between higher education institutions, Congress, and federal agencies, with one of its core missions being to support the International Organization of Higher Education. This begs the question then, what this means for all these guys who were or are planning to go to the U.S. The ACE rep had a comment on this.
Well, I'm watching very closely what our numbers are going to be in the fall for international students, because again, I'm very worried that prospective students, when they're making that enormous financial decision about where they're going to study, if that it's going to be too risky to come to the United States. Students will start to see our numbers going down. Last year, it was a $43 billion economic impact across the United States. Having international students come to the United States is enormously impactful, not just for our colleges and universities, but it's good for the entire United States.
So this is a very big one as well. You know, Trump has just started with Harvard, but how far across the U.S. and all U.S. institutions is it going to spread? Mm-hmm. And what does that mean for all those people from across the globe who would like to study and work or just study in the U.S.? One of them is the senator. You studied in the U.S.
Yes, I did.
You have to. What does this mean?
I think for me, I see it as an opportunity. I always take something negative and make positive out of it. I'd like to invite Harvard to come to Kenya. I'll give them land for free to build a university here so that students from Kenya who would want to go to Harvard can be able to study and get the same education here. All those foreign donors can then be able to fund that university here in Kenya, because here we're welcome. And of course, it will be able to enrich. I think for us, we should take it as an opportunity for us to be able to invest into to revamp our education. You know, invite all these people. If it is going to affect the entire United States, you know, why not then look into elsewhere? When I was going to school in America, it was different. You know, I remember my first school, I was like the only international student from Kenya. You know, my second school, I was definitely the other only international. It's only when I went to UMass Boston that I had other Kenyans who were there that I could be able to meet. So this is an opportunity for us. We shouldn't be looking at it as if we know so much of what is happening. We won't. And you know, sometimes reality clicks. I saw yesterday that Elon Musk, having realized that his business is now collapsing, is now focusing back. You know, a few minutes of an outage on the X made him realize that, hey, I've been focusing a lot on things that I shouldn't do. Let me now look at what I'm supposed to be doing. So maybe at some point Trump will realize that, hey, he's supposed to lead the Americans, and meddling so much into their personal affairs is destroying the economy. And then he'll be like, hey, I better go back to this. And then also the justice system in America. I think it is going through a very, very difficult time at the moment, because of course of interest and all that stuff, but I firmly believe in it, and it is actually giving certain orders that the White House never expected to get.
True.
So I don't think it's something that we should be crying so much about. Let's look at it as an opportunity. So if there's anyone out there who is feeling threatened, please come to Kenya. We have plenty of land. I myself will volunteer and I'll give you a lot of land for free.
Harvard Nairobi campus. I can get behind
Masai
it.
campus.
Masai campus. Oh, okay. Sorry.
We'll send them to Mosiro. We have a lot of land in Mosiro. We have land all everywhere. So we'll give them. Let them come, and our people will benefit.
I like that. Just before we went on the break, we were wrapping up on the conflict of interest bill and the deletion of clauses. And you've said that a lot of the clauses that were in this bill are provided for elsewhere in law, and it would have been, you know, extra legislation which costs taxpayers more money. Though some would argue, in a country where everything is a connection, everything is, my uncle knows so-and-so and he's going to do this for me. I've given him my CV. Everything is a conflict of interest, and especially with our leaders, it wouldn't hurt to have consolidated legislation around conflict of interest.
Let's get out of that mindset. Let's get out of mindset. For how long? For which generation? How many generations? You know, my parents' generations, my generation, my kids' generation will always be saying, oh, I know somebody, let me take this. No, it's about meritocracy. Can we now start preaching meritocracy? Look at what Gen Zs have done to this country.
Theoretically, it's about,
You know, it is
Senator,
not-
theoretically, it's about meritocracy.
No, let's make it positive.
Let's be honest, as we sit here today, a lot of lawmakers have interest, are now legislating in industries in which they take part in. And that's a conflict of interest.
Let me answer that question. You know,
if I am a farmer, I am a dairy farmer,
yes,
and I sit in the Senate, I sit in Parliament,
yes,
I could make legislation around dairy farming. I could say, let me present a bill that bans imports of dairy because I want the price of my dairy to go up.
Let me actually now give
or
you
vice versa.
Let me give you a practical example.
Okay.
I'm sponsoring a legislation to be able to introduce a standard-based seed registration system, okay? Different from the one which is currently being which is under KEFIS. Even before this bill would get into public participation, KEFIS are already up in arms because they are seeing there's competition out there. Yet, if you look at our production per hectare of beans in this country, okay? Beans in this country, compared to Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, you know, and I think the other country was which one? I did a comparison. In Tanzania is 1.7 tons per hectare. In Uganda is 1.6 tons per hectare. In Kenya here, 0.7 tons a hectare. Why? Because when you want to register a seed, it takes you 4 to 5 years for it to be done. So then, why not do this? Why not look at, why don't we demystify this process of registering seed and make sure that we allow innovation to take place, such that you can begin by have KEBS. KEBS have got international standards. You know, let them sort of like monitor this, and reduce the period from 4 years to 6 months. Let KEFIS continue doing it. Now, instead of even people reading the bill and understanding it and trying to contextualize and saying that we've got to leapfrog and also defeat all the East African countries in terms of our production, the people who have an interest there are already saying, let's kill this because this is going to get into our budget. Everything should not be a budget. You know, I agree with you that sometimes people, when they're in a particular field, they will influence the legislation that comes out to be able to better them. You know, we saw that happening before. But I know the men and women in Parliament at some point will be like, hey, boss, this is not good. You know, their conscience will make them see the light, and they will not go in with those whatever.
Hey, Senator, we can't be depending on conscience when we could have law.
Let me tell you.
We could have law and we want to depend on goodwill.
No, you make the law, but I was responding to the specific issue that you raised, that some people might be interested in advocating for their interest. I'm in the dairy sector. I'm not going to lie to you. But currently, what am I doing? I'm trying to make sure that I train more youth to get into the dairy sector so that they can benefit.
You're one, but now do we have... Okay, let's leave the
So
conflict of
it's
interest.
back to Parliament.
Yes.
How do you see this bill going?
Yeah.
The President has sent it back to Parliament with a memorandum and saying, look, all these amendments...
Which bill?
The conflict
of interest.
The conflict of interest bill, when it came in, all of us must realize that, Eric, you're my friend. Your girlfriend should not be tied to me. Part of the provision that we deleted is that your girlfriend and her relatives should not do business with government. Why? Tomorrow you can break up with that girl, but just because you are your friend to Ledama Olekina becomes a liability, you will not want to be my friend so that you can continue doing business. The way it was crafted, it was not right. Let us carry out comparative politics. Let us carry out comparative legislation. Look at America. Look at the UK. Let's take their conflict of interest bill, put it here, put the Kenyan one. You will see that this is what was being introduced was to colonize our minds. We are not intelligent enough to be able to fight for merit. We're not intelligent enough to be able to declare interest. Yani, Eric, you come now before a committee. Because I'm your friend, I now stop the meeting. I run to EACC. Or EACC sends somebody there and I say, EACC, I'd like to declare my interest. Eric is my friend. That's ridiculous. those provisions, you know, let me tell you.
So what happens now?
No. We actually, we worked on the bill. We saw what we think fits the people. Remember, Eric, I'm elected to represent the interests of the people. You know, there's a lot of
sensationalization.
My throat can't even do it. Whatever, you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
On the content of the bill before even people read them. You know, let's calm down. Let's read. You know, when I give you this paper now, and I tell you read page number 6 of the Daily Nation. Here you'll be up in arms fighting me, Ledama Olekina, state bids to snoop on internet users. This is a bill proposed by Margaret Keitany. It will have to go through the entire process, public participation. Instead of like flying into a frenzy on a matter which can be dealt with, that goes through first reading, second reading, committee of the whole, you know, which the committee presents a report. Hold your horses. Any legislator can propose anything. Then it's now brought in and said, will this work?
Yeah.
If that legislator is able to convince, like in the Senate, you have to convince 24 senators. That is under Article 123. Convince 24 senators that the piece of legislation that you're calling for is good for this country.
Okay.
Once you convince those ones, then it goes down to the National Assembly. There you convince, I don't know how many.
Yeah, there's the process to make sure it goes through. I think, though, it comes down to issues around public trust, but even as we integrate that, you just talked about, you know, mentoring young people. I think you've just talked about that in the region.
Yes.
We think about how the protests last year were led with this promise that something was going to shift. And then months later, here we are, there's broad-based, there's handshake, there's
bread-based.
There's bread-based. So I think the question I'm asking is, first, maybe I'll start with a personal one for you in terms of ODM and whether you're actually, you know, ODM is in government or opposition, number one. What is your position with regards to where you stand? Before we go into public trust, because I was trying to link it here.
My own position. My own position is that I fully support the broad-based government, and I'll tell you why I do. For many years, there are many regions in this country which development did not go to. With the support of Raila Amolo Odinga and coming together with President William Ruto, for the first time, I see the prospect of Narok County having an international airport. And what does that mean? What does it mean for Narok County to have an international airport? And because I'm pushing it, and I told the president that this project must be completed. And the president said, within 15 months, KAA, and I want to repeat again, KAA and Narok County government. Narok County government is supposed to build the terminal. KAA, please don't dilly-dally, because this is going to cost the president his election if you don't deliver the airport in Narok. I support this broad-based fully because I know for once we have about 3,000 young men and women of Narok who have got their own tourist vans that will benefit and get employment. Because then all tourists will be required to fly to the Narok International Airport. They will be picked there and driven 80 kilometers to the park. And we hope that the youth in that area who've got all these vehicles will be able to benefit that. Why will I not support the broad-based government that if it is giving me that? What option did I have? Let me tell you. And this is the reality. I wish you could take the budget of Kenya and look at Kikuyu constituency as an example, where Kimani Ichung'wah comes from. Look at where this other constituency where the... Kiharu.
I know, that's
okay. You know, when you look at the amount of money which was being put in that constituency, you actually think that you live in another world and you don't live in Kenya. The women, Maasai women, depends on these beads. Here's Zote, these ones. For once, because of this broad base, recently we opened a bidding center at the gate of, Maasai Mara Game Reserve. We got 3 more roads, tarmac roads, we could not have gotten those things.
Why not?
Why not? That's what I'm trying to
because of the you know, it goes down to the session paper number 10 of 1965, where development was skewed to a particular area. So let me tell you, it's a number of it's a game of numbers. Let me tell you. No, let me finish this. It's a game of numbers.
Has the MOU redone the session paper number 10 of 1965? Has the MOU,
the Constitution of Kenya,
has the MOU given Parliament less powers to appropriate funds? Because Parliament appropriates money.
No, Eric, the Constitution of Kenya, by setting up the Equalization Fund, started redoing the session paper number 10 of 1965. Now, when reality hits and you see that, hey, okay, we have 47 counties. We have Garissa here. Okay? We have Isiolo. We have Wajir, which before all these were not connected. All of a sudden now, because of seeing that Kenyan politics is not about 2 tribes, it's about all the 47 tribes. These counties are now connected. So when you're looking at the decision making, when you look at it, when the man on the helm up there is seeing, hey, there's so much money going into Mount Kenya region, yet this area does not have anything, I will switch this, my friend. I will support that person.
So does he need ODM to do that?
Let me tell you.
Said, he is the man at the helm.
I'll tell you something.
With constitutional powers of the sword, right?
You know, Eric,
the National Assembly and the Senate appropriate money. Let's just deal with the National Assembly. Are you saying that the National Assembly did not put in money to start the Narok International Airport or to finish it?
They didn't.
Because they did not have
They
power.
did not.
Why?
They did not, because they had no interest in it. Because the people who were in the budget committee have no interest in it.
So now who has the interest in it now?
The person who has an interest
is William Ruto now?
Is a person who realizes the importance of Masai Mara Game Reserve.
Okay. So
if Narok County alone collects 5 billion, how much is the national government collecting from
William
Masai Mara?
Ruto as president?
Okay. William Ruto as president and Raila Amolo Odinga, when they sit down, they looked at the entire country and they said, let's support, you know, we have always supported this area. We continue supporting it, yes, but also let's look into these other areas.
So did Raila need to have to sit in that conversation?
My friend, he does not need to sit in that conversation as a person. But when he says, now I would like us to support this government and see how it can be able to help us, it sends a message to Ledama Olekina that, hey, now it's an opportunity for me. Let me grab this opportunity to make sure that my people have the services. So I go there and I rally for my people to get, because I know when I stand there, Raila Amolo Odinga will support my position.
Okay.
And it makes sense.
We have a caller from Ruaka. Hicks, I'm told is the name. I'm hoping I'm getting it right. Who has a question? Nixon from Ruaka. Dixon. Okay. Good morning.
Yes, hi. Morning to you.
Morning. What's your question for the senator? Ama, your comment?
My question for the editor is there. Okay, sorry, I'm a Tamara.
No need to apologize. Go on.
Yeah, so I can say you're the son of the elite. Actually, we in my system we are the one who removed Moi in 2002. And Oletimama, I believe you, is your father.
Politically or biologically? What do you mean?
I don't know.
Okay.
Like,
continue the question. He'll answer.
Let me say, in terms of the spiritual fathers in politics.
Okay, Godfather.
Just like the elite of Uhuru, Raila, Ruto, they are all the system powers. My question is, you have a broad-based government. What about the poor man? Like us, we want to become leaders. We are stammerers. We don't have leaders. We never be appointed. We have points.
All right.
We want to change our country by each and every kind of way.
Okay.
The natural, the political, the religious, each and every goal kind of way.
All All right. Thank you, Dixon.
Thank God you are appointed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
What
Dixon.
about us?
Yeah, thank you. And that's what I was asking.
I was not appointed. I was elected. You know, there's a difference between being appointed, and I would never want to be appointed because I want to be able to have a purpose.
Yeah.
When you're appointed, you sort of like worship one individual,
Yeah.
but when you're elected,
Yeah.
you are responsible to millions.
He's speaking
so his
to
question is a very important question.
Go ahead.
And I think I will tell you, I think his name was Hillary?
Dixon.
Dixon, you need to go back to the citizens of Kenya and convince them that you want to be elected. And lay out your manifesto, tell them this is what I want. It is not money. I, Ledama Olekina, do not give out money. I don't give out money to be elected. In fact, if you ask most Maasais, they'll tell you this guy does not even have an agent. It's because they believe that you are there to help them. And when you are there, you don't sleep. You think about the responsibility. These people have trusted you. You know, so Dixon, the broad-based government for me, my entry into the broad-based government is to make sure that those poor people get their services. Those women who walk miles to get water also get water. And that is what I'm doing. When I walk to every ministry, I force. Right now, I've been able to make sure that electricity has been taken to, if you go to Kilgore's constituency, you'll be shocked. I build milk coolers, and when I build a milk cooler, I say, this milk cooler will help this community. It will help these women sell milk here. These women need to be able to see when they're milking their cows, take electricity to their homes. And 3,000 homes in one region get electricity because of this development. Right. So really, it's just about us talking. So look at it. So for me, as I'm concerned, for the next 2 years, you will not hear me politicking, my friends. You will hear me pushing for development. And what I want to tell you, and Janet, you addressed something, and I was hoping that you could go into it deeply, about the Gen Z's protest.
Yeah. Just before, we have to go on a short break, but when we come back, you're the senator for Narok, you're also the senator from Narok. What happens to all the other Kenyans who come from places that are not part of this broad-based, bread-based, right? Now, do their women not get to see while milking cows? Those are the questions we'll be asking Senator Ledama when we get back. And of course, the issue of young people and elective politics. Hashtag is Fixing the Nation and TV. 400.
Ledama Olekina, the senator for and from Narok County, is our guest. And we're now talking about, national politics and broad-based government. Daniel from Rungai is on the line. Good morning, Fixer. Daniel, uko hapo umeenda? Umetoka kidogo?
Ni kama tumempoteza.
Kama ametoka kidogo.
Okay.
Aya, akirudi tutamchukua tuendelee na mazungumzo haya. So, Senator, as we were going to the break, also there's a question that you have not responded to. Evans from the USA who had asked about
the water
management company.
You see, the biggest problem is that, water is actually devolved. But we're still facing a very big challenge with these water regulatory bodies, WASREB. And there's also a piece of legislation which was being sponsored by the National Assembly that we are completely opposed to it in the Senate, because water is supposed to be managed by the county governments. These water companies, before we actually summoned the governors to appear before the Public Investments Committee of the Senate, they were being run without any oversight from the county government. So now, when we actually called the governor, and we told the governor that you are the CEO of the county, and this water company is under you, is when now we started seeing things happening. If you go to Trans Nzoia County, and I think Trans Nzoia and Bungoma County, they were sharing one water company. If you go to Kisii and Nyamira County, they were sharing one water company. It is only counties like Narok which have their own water company. Nakuru has its own water company. But you will see that even these regulatory bodies would be dealing with several counties. Yep. So that's where the disconnect comes in. We had a very good example of Murang'a County. And Murang'a County, citizens and businessmen were actually running that company. But when we now went and told Kangata that he had to tell the people of Equity, there was one chairman of Equity, that you can no longer be part of this, he was ready, and he did hand it over back to the county government. So it will take some time before everyone realizes, but I want to ask the county governors to listen to what citizens are saying. The only way that this county water companies will be able to make sense is if they actually manage to involve the CC in charge of water to be part and parcel and even appoint an individual to this independent water company.
That's what Evans is against. He's against it because he's saying that what we see in the water management companies is, first of all, the boards. The county governments the governors have influence in appointments to the board, and that is true.
Yes.
The board of a water management company is appointed by the governor. And so there's already political interference in this sense. Many of the water service providers, managers, because I've sat with them in some of their engagements, they complain of interference from that level of governors. Because they are coming in to run a water services company professionally, but then there's a political promise that was made by this guy when he was campaigning to be governor, and he or she has come in and now said, I've brought in my people into the board, and this is what I want.
Let me be very honest to, what's his name? Evans. Unless you amend the constitution, completely, there's nothing you can do. Because county governments can have companies. And when they have those companies, the person who is the CEO of the county government is the governor. So whether you like it or not, he will be the one who will carry out that function of appointing the board. So what we need to do is now to try to awaken the fiduciary responsibility on the part of these board members who are appointed to serve various state agencies. I mean, the constitution is clear. When you're a state officer or anything, there's certain authority and powers that you are given. You have to sort of like run independent, but be accountable. So you might be against that. And I'd lie to you and say that I agree with you. But when the constitution says that the governor is the CEO of a county, it's quite simple.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
He is not the CEO of the water service provider.
He's the CEO of the county government, and the water company is one of his babies. So you cannot come in and say, I'll run independently. Who has given you the powers?
Back to the handshake conversation.
Okay, so let's go back to the broad-based conversation.
In 2018, March 2018, Raila Uhuru shake hands. And there's a handshake that runs from 2018 to 2022. 2025, March, again, Raila, Ruto shake hands. And now you're saying that this one is delivering. Are you saying that this one is delivering and the previous one did not deliver?
No, I did not say that, and I'm not going to compare the two because it's not apples to apples. You want me to compare apples to oranges? No, I can't. There are different circumstances. Now, I want the Rendile, who are a subtype of the Maasai. I want the Samburu, who are a subtype of the Maasai. I want the Chamus, who are in Baringo, to be able to get their constituency, their subtribe of the Maasai. I want the Maasai of Narok and Kajiado to be able to benefit. These people have been terrorized, stigmatized for so many years. They have not benefited. If you look at this broad-based government recently, led to a district, a commissioner, being sent to Mukutani, where if you look at the history of Mukutani, it is divided into three. On this side, the Pokot. This side, the Tugen. Here, the El Chamus. These people don't even live in their homes. In fact, there's a project that I'm coming up with to be able to give them homes. I want these people to be restocked. If I'm given an opportunity by this broad-based government to go there and say, now, I want to put all these people in this broad-based government, but these are our issues. Can you articulate them? At the end of this broad-based is when I'll now be able to put it in the scale.
So what's the difference between this handshake and what makes this one an orange?
It's very different because
and the previous one a mango.
I think on this one, I was involved in those consultation. Raila came to my home, met about 250 Maasais. Raila went to other parts of the country, met with about 250 or 300. We went to Busia, met with about 50,000 plus people who attended the big function, and say, gentlemen, I'd like to consult, because Raila consults, and say, should we support this government so that we be able to have resources brought to our side? Should we do this to save the country first? Janet, I was saying, you raised the issue of the Gen Zs.
Yeah.
And the Gen Zs raised pertinent issues.
Right.
They told Raila, step aside. for us to be able to fix this nation. But when things were not being fixed, when Raila came in and said, let's sit down, you know, it's sort of like there was hail, storm, and then all of a sudden, everything is chilled. So now it is for us to follow. Because Ledama was witnessing the signatory. I was the MC of that March 2025. Ask me about this Raila-Ruto engagement. Ask me to call them to make sure that they deliver. This one, I will have the moral authority to do that because I read the intention. You know, it was actually an expression of interest, really. Because an MOU is detailed. This was an expression of interest to work together. And so far, I can see that when I stand there and I say, by the way, before I even discuss anything else, these people who have been terrorized for many years, you know, I want you to consider them. Let me be very, what do you call it? Let me demystify what I actually mean. If you go to Narok and Kajiado, those two counties, you go to Marsabit. And the reason why I'm comparing it with Marsabit is because Kajiado County, because of lack of laws, proper laws, zoning laws, right now the Kapute Masais have been pushed with a lot of expansions. People coming in and they are selling their land, and land which was agricultural land has already turned into commercial. No change of user was put in place. So a lot of people are getting in there. There are no laws. If that happens in Marsabit, how are we going to ensure that the people there do not become slaves? If we go to Narok County as an example, what I'm calling for now is proper zoning laws. Because the people there will be strangers to their own lands. And what will that result to?
You need broad-based for that?
Yes, we need people who understand. We need people who sit down and say, we'll give you an opportunity to tell us what your issues. Let me tell you, previous governments,
are guaranteed in the Constitution.
They're guaranteed in the Constitution, but it depends on who is running, whose interest do they have in place.
So as a senator, your job is to oversight, right?
My job is to
legislate to oversight.
Yes.
Absolutely. Why not oversight the implementation of this constitution that allows for all these things to happen, as opposed to shaking hands? Because again, you're a senator, oversight is part of your job. You know the role of an opposition. We currently don't have an opposition.
You know, if I didn't like you, I would actually say, I'll ask you whether you're the only visitor in Jerusalem. Aren't you aware of what happens in politics? Politics is all about interest. Politics is all about interest.
Here's the thing. When we were discussing
Politics
the conflict
is
of
all
interest
about
bill, we were supposed to work based on goodwill from the political class. Suddenly, we're discussing
Can I justify what I'm saying?
Oversight.
No, we are discussing matters of oversight and legislation. If I develop a piece of legislation, I need to be able to build consensus in the Senate and tell them that this is good. This is good for your people. It is good for my people. It protects us. Yes, Ledama Olekina is a senator from Narok and the senator for Narok. My vote alone, one vote, will only be important if there are 23 senators voting for a particular matter. And now Ledama is not sure, and I'm convinced that is the only time it will matter. One vote will not make a difference. So when it comes to the issues of what this government is willing to deal with, I had a conversation with the cabinet secretary.
Lobby the other 25.
I had a conversation with the cabinet secretary in charge of transport.
Okay.
Churchill, a gentleman I have a lot of respect for. And I said, cabinet secretary, all these roads, be honest with me, will they be done? He said, I give you my word. I've come, I've looked at the way money was skewed, development was skewed toward a particular region. And now because we are talking and we are not fighting, I also want you guys to have some form of equity. Not equality, but some form of equity.
Senator?
And I'm happy about that.
Because we're talking...
Just wait, Senator, sorry, I'm cognizant that we're almost at time. The reason I wanted to first find out your stand before coming to Gen Z was to understand whether you supported or for
I fully supported.
Which you've supported.
I fully supported.
Which is still goes against what the young people...
No, it doesn't.
It does.
It does not, because...
When the handshake was made...
It does
remember
not.
the Gen Z protests, people put their lives on the line. Then they said, then the cabinet was dissolved, and then, you know, all of those things happened. Young people felt, and a lot lot of Kenyans felt disenfranchised because it compromises opposition, to Mariam's point, and then public interest seems sidelined. Now, maybe it's working for you, and it's great that as a senator you're representing
I'll be
your
very
county.
honest with you.
Hang on, you're representing the needs of your county. You're saying there hasn't been equity, which is actually fair for somebody who comes from there. But then what does it mean for the other counties? Because there's no equity if one county is being given resourcing over and above others. So the 2 points I'm making is, number one, broad-based did not serve the legacy of what the Gen Z-led protests were. It did not. On the contrary, it made people more disillusioned. Because
no, it doesn't. It does not.
And then number two, to your point about resourcing for counties, like I said, great that you are fighting for Narok County. It makes sense. That's what you're supposed to do. But it does not solve unity for the country.
I'll tell you something. Whether, Janet, you like it or not, William Ruto is the president of Kenya until 2027. If you're so vexated and pissed off by the policies and you believe that everything that this broad-based government is doing, marshal up support, vote him out in 2027. You cannot do anything. You know, let's call a spade a spade. For now, my job is one. I want to make sure that I push for all these development projects that have been said they are going to be done in Narok to be completed. That is my responsibility as a senator elected by the people of Narok County. Now, as a senator from Narok, my responsibility is to make sure that there is equity. It is not fair that for centuries, you know, let's say for, you know, decades, you guys from the mountain region have been benefiting. Roads, if you go to Kikuyu constituency, here, I'm telling you, the roads that you will pass, I want to see even one main road from Eorekule to Naivasha being tarmacked. I want to see the road from Wasonyiro to Tanzania being tarmacked to help those people be able to also change their lives. Let me tell you, and I want to be very honest with you, if you go to Marsabit right now and you go to a place called Lysamis constituency, you will be shocked. When you pass that road and you're driving back, the road was done because it is an inter-country road. But inside, those kids have got nothing.
Why do we have a constitution if
you have a constitution, but it is skewed.
If you have to kiss the ring to get development.
It is skewed because, let me tell you, do you know what they do? I'll be very honest with you. They say, number one, and I'll actually draw this for you. Number one, Kikuyu. They say 8-point-something million. Number two, Kalenjin. They say X number. Wait, then they go, I'm just giving you some numbers, yeah? I'm not so accurate with them.
Draw on this one.
Whatever.
We can even put it on the screen.
Give it to me.
Yeah.
Sorry. You know, it's empty. So they actually say one. They say number one, Kikuyu.
Who?
8.9 million. Wait, I'll show you. Number two, they say Kalenjin. 6-point-something million. Then they come in, Luyas. And then others. So we are others, we don't matter. This broad base is making others matter.
Who's doing that? Who does this?
This is done by the system. Because right now,
who is the system?
Look at it. We impeach a guy called Gachagua. He knows very well the law says he will never hold any public office. But he's out there duping people that he's going to form a political party so that he can do what? He can run and defeat because of one principle that says innocent.
You are digressing.
I'm not digressing. I'm telling you,
Senator,
it is an issue of numbers.
No, Senator.
Eric, it's an issue of numbers.
It is an issue of numbers, yes. Parliament has the power to make the budget. And you said this.
I said, yes, it has the power of the past. It has the power of the past. Yes.
And that means even appropriation.
Let me be very honest with you.
Appropriation, true or false? That's the constitution.
Appropriation, true.
Okay.
Very true.
By line item, true.
Very true.
That currently, committees of parliament are looking at everything that has been proposed and appropriating money per item, per line item. So it's a fallacy when you say that parliament then, with 290 plus 12 plus 47 members of parliament, 395 in the National Assembly, 397, actually sit and appropriate more money to one region against the other. And this is a system issue.
Eric.
And that now, because you have a handshake, the same members of the National Assembly who would last year have appropriated more money to constituency X, this time because of a handshake, they feel, oh my God, yeah, we shall now appropriate money to which road again? That goes from where to Naivasha?
From Orekule to Naivasha.
Orekule to Naivasha. Why this time?
Ain't no fallacy, it's a reality, my brother. Let me be honest with you. If you're the only visitor from Jerusalem,
I think I am.
Jerusalem, you need to smell, I
The
dare
coffee.
use another word, but you need to smell the coffee. Mm-hmm. Politics is not about the constitution. Politics is about interest. Politics is about interest. It is a numbers game. That is the reality in this country.
So suddenly,
until the time, you know the problem, one of my pet peeves, Eric, is that, yes, we are a very free country. We are a democratic nation. We are intelligent. We try to compare ourselves with the US. Compare ourselves with the US, forgetting that it took hundreds of years for them to get to where they are now. Okay? We can leapfrog, but ain't not that fast. We go slowly by slowly. Right now, what I want to see, my interest is one, Eric, and I'm not going to lie to you. Janet, I will never lie to you. You know, I don't want to be blunt like other people would do it and say it is our time to eat. But the reality is, it is our time for us to get development.
So this president,
Okay.
who was deputy president
Yes.
for 9 years, and has been president before the handshake for 2 years, has now realized that the others matter.
It's not about him realizing.
If it is about that.
It is about, you know, there are those things which are called, I told you very well, intended and unintended consequences. So for me, I will be intentional to make sure that I advocate and I push for resources to be sent to Narok County. I will kiss their feet so that my people who are jobless get jobs. I will do whatever it takes because I realize one thing, that power is transcendent.
So you
know,
said,
consultation, if you want, I love the topic of the day. I like your program, Fixing the Nation. How do you fix a nation? Do you fix a nation through a sword? No, you don't. Consultation. Let's sit on the table. Let's try to make sense. You know, it may not be your bread and butter, you know, but it might just save a life. So it might just allow a child to be able to go. It's about debate, convincing others.
And that is why we created parliament.
You do that in parliament, but the problem is this. The problem in this, Eric,
Senator.
I love that.
Let me finish.
I would love you to form a country.
Let me finish.
I'll be your president, or I'll be even your member of parliament. You'll be the president of your own country because you and I speak to each other. Senator, when I went to parliament, I'll finish with this.
You said
let me do this, and then you can talk.
We have 2 minutes before we wind up.
For a president to come and say we want development in this area.
True.
The same thing I'll tell you. Members of parliament should not be waiting for a president or a handshake to say we shall get a road done.
Unfortunately,
between where again?
Unfortunately, the way our system is designed, those who make a government come from political parties. And they subscribe to the constitution of their political party. And they are party leaders. So they have to do what the party leader says. Let me tell you, and this is the end. When I joined parliament, this was white. Okay? And this was black. Okay? Trust me. I now see it the opposite. This is pure white and this is dark black. Why? Because of the reality. I come from the school of thoughts that believes that parliament should just legislate. That was the first thing that we discussed here, Eric. But you know what? My colleagues, and they are the majority, believe that no, we should have CDF, we should have the oversight fund, we should have our women kitty. You know, everybody wants to feel relevant. We go into a political rally and it's a competition between the president, I've done this, I'm doing this thing, I'm launching this, the governor, the MP, the women rep. No, the only person who is left out there to say, oh, Senator, now umefanya nini? So that now tells the other senators that, oh, let's push for this oversight fund so that even us can be able to do that. But the reality is this. We are a young nation and we are developing. I love the spirit of Gen Zs, you know, but let's be practical. Rome was not built in a day. It took 40 years to be able to build it. So now, the day that a child from Hula Hula, I don't even know whether you know that place in Marsabit. Hula Hula. You go to that place, you look at people, you are like, these are Kenyans, my friend. The day that child will have an opportunity to sit down as a cabinet secretary in this country
Is the
a
day
day that I
Parliament
will
will do
say
its job.
the day Parliament will do its job. Thank you.
Let's end it there. There's a lot of feedback. I don't know if we're supposed to be winding up.
Maybe a minute.
Maybe
just
a minute.
a minute of feedback as we get into the break.
Are you on
right?
YouTube, Mariam?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you want to read some?
Yes. Kikombe says, if Gen Z had wanted to consult, they would have done it in June 2024. We'll persist to push until such mentality step aside. Nyambura says, Eric, you need to understand where the senator is coming from. The system has collapsed and is no longer delivering the outcomes it should, so people have resorted to consultations and negotiations. Mwangi Gishimu says, shocking. Our esteemed senator suddenly discovered skewed resource distribution only after joining the handshake.
No.
What a key eye for injustice.
I always knew.
Truly a miracle.
But I couldn't do anything. Now I can.
All right, we have to go on a break, but we've been with Senator Ledama Olekina. I think this conversation, again, we need to pull at it because
we must continue.
A lot.
We're putting a pause. We're putting a pin on it.
Just a pin. Just a pin. But in the next hour, we'll be talking about youth and governance. # is Fixing the Nation NTV.